as I was saying, Grinder, I believe, Grinder is connecting the pre-psychological self, we might say, the new code, the agenda of the new code. If you go study new code, and you should, everybody practicing NLP must, and when to use that, must, modal operator of necessity, must study new code. At least to know something about it. And the idea of new code is something that Grinder, in my experience of John, has been really central to his entire thinking the whole time. It's just he's made it more explicit by calling it new code. But new code, however you want to think of that, is linking the pre-conscious self, the self that's actually sort of below the chunk down self, below the area of bound consciousness, to the unbound area of sort of primordial perception, pre-conscious attending, and connecting that with the ego state, which of course doesn't mean it's making you have a big ego. It is connecting the ego sense, or that sort of the sense of I. I'm using ego in the sense of kind of the I, or the me, or the field of my being which I identify with myself. So new code is connecting, is making a connecting bridge between a self which is almost an unnamed self, a self that has no I consciousness, almost a primordial awareness type of self, is moving up and connecting with and becoming integrated with the waking, or even the sleeping ego state. And so this is another way of expanding the ego state. Now, when we're talking about the ego state, there's a lot of room for confusion. So let's understand something. Often, the more narcissistic, and there's plenty of narcissism, the narrower or more narcissistic or more self-absorbed, actually the ego state is smaller. The more someone is fascinated with their celebrity, or the more someone is fascinated sort of with their identity, that actually represents a very, very small and constricted ego state. Or when one has to see things in a certain way and can't see any other perspective, and they can only see from their own one point of view, that is often the most constricted ego state. So when we talk about a big ego, we're actually talking about a very tiny and constricted ego state, where someone who is relatively egoless, or can use their ego in a very constructive way, in a very self-enlarging way, can have a healthy ego in the sense that they have a healthily bound, unified, well-integrated sense of self, but it's not over-identified with their little tiny sort of infantile core. So whether we're using a Bandlerian technique, which will be linking the chunked up area of beliefs, representations, theories, principles, and linking that with very specific imagery and very specific ways of manipulating internal perception, that's just another strategy for enlarging the ego state. So Grinder has his strategy, Bandler has his, Erickson had his, and although Erickson is referenced a great deal, I don't think NLP is really all that directly Ericksonian in many ways. Erickson had a very idiosyncratic and probably very difficult to replicate personal life and learning curve, so I don't think that we're really going to be doing Erickson directly, but hypnotically we can be changing meta-beliefs and sort of incorporate Erickson's strategy for going up to meta-beliefs, how one goes about the process of believing, which is what areas of religions, philosophies, meditative practices have often had as part of their message, or part of their energy, has had something to do with the shaping and the sculpting, you might say, of meta-beliefs. So if we go back down here to the ego state, and we might be asking, okay, well, I've got these multiple choices. There are many places I can go and choose from. What could I, as a practitioner or a student, be specifically taking from this that I will immediately put into practice?